Welcome to Pieces of the Past. My name is Deborah. I have a passion for fiber arts and creating new things from old. Join me on my journey as I explore the endless possibilities, the tools, and the techniques to create new pieces of the past. Hello there. Thank you for joining me. Before we get started on today's topic, I wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who subscribed and liked my videos from the last video that we put up. I was overwhelmed with the number of responses to that video. For me and my channel, it pretty much went viral, and I am so excited, and I really want to thank you all. I want to thank you especially for the comments. I really enjoy getting your comments and responding to them. I read them all, and I try to respond to all of them right now. It feels like I'm part of a community and we're talking, so it's fantastic. Today's topic is choosing fabrics for your quilts. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean choosing colors for your quilts, but it's how do I figure out what fabrics I want to put in this quilt or that quilt. What is it going to look like? How do I do? I don't want to be overwhelmed. How do I do this? So I was talking to my friend, and she wanted me to make a video on how do I choose my fabrics, because she said you always choose just the perfect fabrics, whatever. And she said I want to know because I get stuck. I get a quilt pattern picked out and then I get stuck on the fabric choices and the colors because there's so many out there. So could you make a video about how you go about your process? And I thought, okay, sure. So when I thought about it some more, I was like, okay, how do I do this? What do I do? And a lot of it to me is intuitive, which it is to you too. But I tried to break down the process into words so I could explain what steps I go through. I go through them very quickly, and you probably will too. But what steps do I use? How do I choose my fabrics? I thought about it a lot, and this is the video that basically shows how I choose my fabrics, not just by color for my quilts. Anything that doesn't make sense, again, leave me a comment. That would be awesome. First thing you want to consider when you're putting together a quilt is, who is the quilt for? Why am I making this quilt? Okay, am I making this for a gift? Is it for a specific person? Am I making it for a quilt that I want to keep in my family? Is it going to be something I'm going to spend lots of hours on that I want it to be passed down? Is it going to be an heirloom someday? Is it going to be a quilt just for me? If it is, then your color choices will be different, right? Is it a quilt that you have a client that maybe says, I want my quilt to be this? Okay, well, that's totally different. They pick out the colors and things, but you need to be able to guide them on how to do that. And hopefully this will explain how. That's the first thing I think of. What am I making? Who am I making it for? So I choose a pattern, or choose a person, or choose a theme, whatever. If it's a personal quilt, a theme. And then I go and I start looking at my fabrics. I look at my own fabrics, and then I also go to the store sometimes and purchase fabrics. Now, if you don't have a lot of fabrics in your stash, one of the ways you can add to your stash is through pre-cuts. They are pre-cut fabrics packaged in a way that you can buy them to make a specific quilt, or you can buy the latest colors by a certain manufacturer, or a certain theme like all flowers or whatever. So I want to show you some of those. First we have the jelly rolls, or in this case, this one is called what is this called? Skinny strip. And this one is called a roll up. Okay, these are basically jelly rolls, but Moda, the company Moda Fabrics, coined the term jelly roll and layer cake. And so these companies, other companies, have to come up with their own names for these rolls. So we have strips. Now you see these are white. Okay, that's important. They also come in colors. They also come in flats like this. These are 10-inch squares, and they're all pre-cut for you. It's great, okay? So different colors. Okay, here's another one. All different. This one has to do with chickens, so there you go. This is my biggest pet peeve with these, is that the sizes of these aren't necessarily true. So for example, this is a, what is this called? I don't know what this is called. Anyway, it's a pre-cut pack of 10-inch squares, and it's for the Hungry Caterpillar quilt. So if I was going to make that quilt, which came out a few years back, I could purchase this package and make that quilt, and I wouldn't have to go individually pick out the different fabrics and colors. Okay, that's great. The problem is, for me, is that this is supposed to be 10 inches. Well, these are cut with a zigzag edge, most of them. All right, and the problem for me is that from the outside of the zigzag to the outside of the zigzag on this package is 10 1/8. Now that causes an issue because every 8 squares you put together is going to give you an extra inch of length that it's going to mess up your measurements. Okay, you need to be more exact than that when you're doing quilting. So do you sew on the inside or the outside of the zigzag? On this one, it appears that you would sew on the inside of the zigzag. Now they cut them in zigzags because they don't fray on the edges that way. But for me, that's a problem. I don't care for that. So I don't generally buy the colored packs. I just don't. I have enough fabrics that I don't need to do that. I do, on the other hand, like these. These are the whites and the neutral tones, the beiges. Okay, those are really good. So if you need a sashing or borders that are solid colors, these are the way to go. Even solid reds or solid whatever, you know, that's really helpful. When you buy the jelly rolls, and I'm using that term loosely, when you buy a jelly roll like this with all these pretty colors, it's great. I mean, you're sitting there looking at it going, ooh, I love all those colors. They look like sherbet, you know. But the problem is that when you get it home, you have one purple strip. That's it. You have one orange strip. Okay, so if you need more of that orange, you've got to go buy the yardage to make up for it, you know, or the squares or whatever to make up for it. So that's where I have a problem with these, is because I will only use like half of them, and the other half I don't like or don't need or whatever, and then I've got these leftover scrap pieces, which is why I tend to make scrap quilts, because I have a lot of scraps. But it's not necessary to pay the money for those when you don't need to. Now, the one exception to that I would say is something like this. Now, this roll was put together by a quilt shop in Hawaii, and my mother-in-law bought this when she went there. And for a $40 roll of fabric, she got a souvenir. And then she brought it home, and she's now passed, but I got it, and I can actually make a quilt with using these fabrics to commemorate her trip. Now that, to me, is more meaningful than buying, you know, a roll of basically colored fabrics that go together. There are other ways to get the pre-cuts. This is a pre-cut kit that I also really like. If I got an invitation to a baby shower and it was 3 weeks from now, a month from now, whatever, I could go get one of these. This is a kit. So it includes the pre-cut squares and the pattern for making the quilt. So this would be, to me, the equivalent of getting a notice that you have to be at a dinner and you have to bring a dessert. And so you're like, oh dear. So you go and you buy a brownie mix and you mix it up. Boom, you've got brownies, you know. So this is the brownie mix, okay? It's all there for you. It's all included. You just add water, and in this case, you just sew it up, and you've got your quilt. that's a really good way to do it. You don't have to choose colors or anything. Okay. So after you look at that, you want to determine the pattern that you're going to use. So I'm going to make this quilt for my brother, and I need to go pick a pattern. Okay. So patterns are all over the place, and very few of the patterns have to do with the colors that you use. They're more about the lights and darks and the contrast, and I'll get into that at the end of the video, and that's like really the meat of the video. So if you want to go down there, you're welcome to do that now, or you can just hang with me, and I promise we'll get there quick. So the colors and the fabrics you choose are going to be based on what pattern you pick. So let's go through the patterns real quick. So is your quilt going to be a all over block pattern? In other words, the blocks are identical. See these blocks here? This is called a churn dash quilt. The blocks are identical. The color of the block is different. You could have all of these blocks be the same color and it would still be a pretty quilt. Okay, so the blocks is one consideration. Is your quilt going to be, maybe you want to make a visual optical illusion quilt? Who knows? You know, sure, why not? Then you might choose something like this. So in this case, the lights and the darks and the color to an extent make the blocks look like they're three-dimensional. All right. Now, in this case, they did use color to show the three-dimensional blocks. But on this one, let me see, where to go? On this one right here, they did not. They used black and white. There are no other colors in here but black and white. So they're using the size of the block, not the color or of the fabric, to make this quilt. So it has nothing to do with color. Okay? You could use red and white or green and white or whatever. As long as they're two opposite, you know, really polarizing colors, you can get the same effect on this quilt. Now, you can use colors. See, this is black and red. Okay? So if you wanted to do an optical illusion quilt, that would be a consideration. Do you want your quilt to have movement? Do you want to show like a wave or something like that? Well then, like a Bargello quilt, you can show that with color and with the size of the blocks. Okay, so you see we're doing lights and darks here on this quilt, right here, to show movement. Okay. Do you want your quilt to be an identifiable object? So that would be like if you were paper piecing. Do you want to have, like this quilt has sewing notions on it. Now, you might want a purple sewing machine, I don't know, but if you want a traditional sewing machine, you would make that machine on this quilt black. And the rotary cutter, you'd probably make yellow, and so forth. So that's something to consider when you're trying to choose the colors and fabrics for your quilt. Okay, a couple more. Now, on these, I want to show you they have to do with scraps. I do a lot of fabric of quilts with scraps. So I really don't focus on the colors of my fabrics. I focus more on the darks and the lights. Is it a big print? Is it a small print? I don't focus on is it a red or a blue, because it doesn't matter to me. My pieces are small enough that when I stand back, it's going to look like a solid. So that triangle that I made out of 5 or 10 different pieces is going to look like a solid color when I put it next to a white triangle. Okay, they're going to be opposite. So it's going to have the same effect as if I made a red triangle and a white triangle. Okay, so these are the scrappy quilts. So you see how they are using color here for this quilt, but they're using lights and darks, so you can see dimension in this quilt, and it's all scraps. All right, they also made it move from reds down to purples, if you notice that. Now on this one, Same thing. All scraps. No real attention paid to the color of the blocks. More attention is paid to is it a light or a dark? So you can see the circles simply because the outer part around the circle is a different tone. It's lighter or darker than the circle itself. And they did mix in reds and yellow, mustardy yellow, butter yellow type colors, but for the most part, they're only working with contrast here to show you the quilt block. Okay. And then the last one I wanted to show you was this one. It's a scrap quilt. And this one they worked with direction. So you can see the reds, of course, because they pop out, right? But what you can see if you look closer is that all of these lines right here on these blocks, they lined up this way. And all of these up here, they lined up this way. And so forth, and these over here. So they're focusing your eye to this square right here, which they chose as red, which is why you see the reds down in here, because there's a red square that starts it off. Your eye looks at that and it goes out and sees all the reds. Okay, that's the beauty of that quilt. They did not go out and choose specific colors for this quilt. They just used scraps. All right, so all of those have nothing to do with a color wheel or choosing your fabrics based on a color wheel or anything like that. Now, if you are interested in the color wheel, I would suggest that you don't go with a traditional color wheel unless you know more about it, in maybe have an art degree or something like that. I would toss this thing away and I would do this one instead. This is a pretty neat tool. I don't use it very much because of the way that I choose fabrics, but it's a 3-in-1 color tool, and it's really handy because it shows you the different lights and darks and tones and so forth and shades. So if you like that kind of thing and you want to take this to the quilt shop, by all means do it. It's really helpful for that. But what I do, and it's interesting because I had to think about it when she asked me to make this video, is, okay, how do I've picked this quilt that I want to make for my brother, and I want to make it with a certain fabric color scheme or whatever. So I want to make it in, let's say, blues. All right. Then how do I pick other colors to go with that? So I would pick, for me, the way I do it the most often is I pick a what's called a focus fabric. And this is a way of doing it that's been done for years and years and years. And this is how I learned to do it, and I still do it today. You pick a fabric that is your main fabric, or not main fabric, but it has more colors in it. Okay. And so in this case, let's say I picked this one. Let's say I'm making it for my sister. Okay. I would pick this color. So I choose this fabric, and then I go and I'm like, okay, I want to go with this red right here. So I chose this fabric. Okay. Then I want to go and say, okay, these two fabrics are very dark. All right. So I want to add something light. So I said, okay, I'll go with this light pink, right? That goes great together, right? The colors are matching up. Everything's wonderful, but it's still kind of dark. So I decided to pull some of the green out that was in these leaves. All right. So I just chose a different color. Now you could do this at the fabric store. You just pull these out and put them all together on the table. So it's still a little dark. So I went with this one, which gave me a lot of white and still pulled the colors for me. But what I did at this point was, when I laid them on the table, I took a picture with my phone, and this is recommended on all color videos. Take a picture with your phone and use the filter on the photo to change it to a black and white. And that will help you see the contrast. That will help you see the contrast, or the value of these, the black and white value of these. So what you don't want to do is make a quilt with these three fabrics. because these three fabrics are all very, very dark in their contrast. They do not have any contrast from each other. Okay, this one's a little in the middle and this one's a little lighter. You will only see that when you take a picture of it and put it in black and white, because if you looked at this one, you would think, okay, well, that's light pink. Well, it's not light pink. It's actually a very dark pink. But you only see that when you put it, when you take a picture. So I had too many darks in this. And so I only knew that when I took the picture. So I went back and I was like, okay, let me add another light to it that still has the green. It still has the blue in it and so forth. And then that gave me a little bit lighter. So then I took another picture. I'm like, okay, that's working. So you determine, take lots of pictures. You determine what color you want, not by the color like pink or blue, but more by the contrast that it provides to your quilt. Because you want that block, that churn dash that we saw, you want that to pop off of the fabric. You want to be able to see it. You want it to be a focal point. And you can't have that if you don't have any contrast between the block and the background. All right. So in this case, in this particular set, I would probably go with a very, very light yellow or something like that as my background for my blocks. And that would set all of these colors off beautifully. So let's look at one more of these. Oh goodness. Let's set these over here. Okay. So I did that same thing, whoops, with this one. This one is not dark like that. It's very light. All right. And I took it and first thing I went with was the orange, of course. There's the orange. Isn't that pretty? And if I took a picture of that, it would be perfect. It would be a light and a dark. It would be awesome. So then I went with the yellow that's in the other flower. Okay. And then I pulled the green for the other flower. You see where I'm going with this? But I'm just picking colors here. I'm not looking at the contrast. What I have to do is take my picture and make sure that I have enough of the light tones, the light values, sorry, to make the quilt work, to make the image pop off of the quilt. So I needed a lighter orange, so I went with that one. And then I still didn't have anything light enough, so I pulled out this blue that's right here and got this one. And I still think I don't have enough light in here, so I'm going to go with a white or a white on white, something like that, to add to this mix. Okay, or you could even do a white with a little yellow dots, or a white with little orange dots, whatever. As long as when you look at it from a distance, it looks white. Okay, then that's going to set off these other colors beautifully. All right, so that is pretty much my process. My favorite process of all of them is to choose a focus fabric or an initial fabric that I definitely want in my quilt, and then I expand from there, take a picture, take out one green, put in another, and take another picture. Just it's not that I didn't like that green or whatever, it's that green wasn't dark enough or that green wasn't light enough, etc. So it's more about contrast and value than it is about the actual color that you pick. Okay, now after I say all of this, the one thing that matters the most in everything that I've said is that you like your quilt. So you can take your pattern, go to the fabric store, pick out your fabrics. I would recommend you don't take your friend with you, because your friend is going to go, oh, those don't go together, or oh, you can't put that next to that, etc. Go by yourself, pick out what you like, and if you want to take some samples home, they cut samples at most of the fabric stores. You can take them home, look at them, go back later and get what you want, or take your phone, take your pictures. That's what's going to be the key. While you're in the store, take your pictures and look at them in black and white and decide what you like the best. I think that's all of this video. I hope it wasn't too scattered for you. I just wanted to share what I do to pick out fabrics, and there's so much more to this, but that'll give you a start as to how to go about choosing the fabrics for each quilt you make, because they're all going to be totally different depending on who you're making it for, what you're making, etc. So anyway, I hope that you like this one, and I really, again, appreciate your subscriptions to my channel. And if you'll like and share the videos, that'd be so awesome. And please keep commenting, because I really like knowing that you're out there and we can chat. And if you have a question, ask me on the comments. I'll be happy to answer. And yeah, so until next time, thank you so much for watching.